to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 150th episode of the Eating at a Meeting podcast. Holy moly, I'm at 150 episodes. I cannot believe that when I started the Eating at a Meeting Facebook group in May of 2020 and started doing Facebook Lives, interviewing people about food and beverage, would I be at 150 episodes? So I am very proud of myself. I am very honored to have interviewed everybody that I have interviewed so far, and I've got more to come. So I'm super, super excited to be here for you. And I hope that you're enjoying all of these episodes. Please drop me a line at hello@thrivemeetings.com to let me know what you think, who you want to hear from too. Have I missed somebody that you want to hear from? But in today's episode, to celebrate 150, a question that I've been asking all of my guests before they get on the show in my guest information form, as well as some of them that I've asked during the show, the question is, what does a safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experience mean to you? And to me, that's what this whole show is about, is how to create safe, sustainable, and inclusive dining experiences for everyone. And so actually, send me a note, put something on Facebook or on the Thrive Meetings Facebook page, or shoot me an email and let me know, what does safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage mean to you? But for this episode, I just wanted to go through some of those answers that I got from these 145, 150 people that I've chatted with over the last 2.5 years to let you know. So, what they say, and what I find amazing by the answers is that they're all different. It means something different to everybody. And I think that's really important to draw upon as well when you're thinking about planning food and beverage for people. Food is personal. Drinking is personal as well. And I know that if you're a meeting planner or you're a hotel chef or a catering chef, you're planning for a large group of people. Even if you're working at a baseball stadium or a football arena, you're cooking for a large group of people. But I still think that you need to think about who you're feeding and how you're feeding them and where that food comes from. So I'm going to read a couple of the, some of the answers that I got from people, before they got onto the show. And then I'm also going to play you a couple of the recordings that I have of people answering the same question. So here we go. The first one I want to start off with was actually during Food Allergy Awareness Week 2022. And it's Gwen Smith, and she is the founder and editor of Allergic Living magazine. And she has food allergies herself. And I think she brings a great perspective to it as well, because she's in the media, so she's doing a lot of research on it. But she is also, food allergies suffer. I don't want to call suffer her, but she has food allergies herself. And make sure you check it out. It's episode 141. But what she said to me was that, to me, safe and inclusive reference a food service establishment being able to accommodate serious food allergies and celiac disease. It includes the manager, some staff with allergy training, and understanding of cross contact. And it also means that somebody who's with food allergies is able to dine out safely is so important to a good and full life. Inclusion matters, she says. And I just think that that's a really good way to start this off, is what does that mean? And I think a lot of people think it really is just food safety, right? But it is, especially when you have somebody with food allergies, what are the steps that you have to take in the back of the house, in the kitchen, as well as serving it? What does that mean? And so it does require training. But I also love the fact that she says it's about being able to dine out safely and to have a good, full life with that. The next one was actually from the same week, and this is an audio recording from my friend Kyle Dine, and kind of on that same kind of context. Kyle's got food allergies himself as well, but he wants you to understand that we want to be able to feel welcome and being fulfilled, and with the ability to giving you as the food service provider or someone as the food service provider, giving me the diner or Kyle the diner the confidence to eat safely in your restaurant. So listen to what Kyle has to say about this.
I think it's one where everybody feels comfortable. And I think for anyone with a dietary restriction, comfortable is a hard target at times. So
Okay.
it's really an experience where you feel safe, you feel the information's been provided to you that you need, you feel welcome, and you feel fulfilled at the end of it. So at the end of the day, it's providing the comfort that gives you confidence to dine safely and well.
And that, yeah, I mean, because and then the sustainability aspect of it is that you're going to come back, right?
Absolutely. It's, when you've set that system up, it's done. And then people will come back and they'll tell their friends and things will grow. And I always think, the places that cater well to people with dietary restrictions need to be rewarded. It's not easy. There are more steps, but it is doable. So absolutely, it needs to be sustainable in that it's a cycle of being rewarded for that work.
My friend Aurora also said something similar to this in episode 149, where we were talking about the sustainability of food, and listen to her answer here about how honoring local flavors and people is really important.
I guess I would have to say that I probably think a little bit more of the inclusive and sustainable aspect from the perspective of the location. So sort of honoring the local terroir, the flavors and the people of the area, and making it sustainable beyond just your building and your event. I think that's a big part of it. And I guess a way that I would say kind of loops all of that together is just transparency, right? Like if you let people know how the food is safe and how it's inclusive and how it's sustainable, if you just reveal the details, I think that goes a long way, right? Because a lot of the stuff we do is already safe, because you technically you shouldn't be able to serve food if it's not safe, right?
Right.
And I get that your definition based on your personal experiences, Tracy, it might be a little bit different, because safety can extend to allergens and things like that. But again, transparency. If you know the ingredients, this isn't a problem, right? So I think that I would like to see more communication to guests about what they're eating, where it comes from, why it's special, how it's made. And again, this goes back to that digital piece. When you go to most food service, you see little paper signs right in front of the food, and I'd love to see more digital presentation, whether that's through an app or on monitors or QR codes on websites or whatever, so that people have more of a live engagement with what am I about to eat? How is it prepared? What's the farm it came from? You could just do so much with just even a 30-second video about the food that you're serving. And I get that does add some labor and technical skills and things, but I think that it could go a long way for creating the safe, inclusive, and sustainable food and beverage.
That's awesome.
Okay, the next person that I want to read something to you from is my friend Joan Eisenstadt. And she is a meetings industry icon. She's a great friend, and she pushes for such great change and perception and understanding of individuals with different needs, so that everybody has a seat at the table or ticket to the show. And her answer in response to my question was that safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage means that it's a conscious, intentional effort in asking questions of participants food providers, and servers in preparing for events, and in follow through to ensure that each party's needs are met and no one is left out by omission or intent. And I think that's really, really important as well, is because food needs to be thought of as being intentional, right? And what we're doing. And I think a lot of what happens in the meetings industry is that meeting planners are presented a set of menus. Here's your menus, just check off what you want. You know, Asian today, deli platter tomorrow, you know, fish and steak duo for dinner, and here's your continental breakfast, right? Those are the options. And then meeting planners are literally left to just check the boxes. These are what we have to offer, and this is what you got. And so it really, to me, there's no intention in that. And I think food is, as I said before, food is very personal, and it is the one thing that we all share. And how can we become more intentional with our food and beverage? And I think it's asking more questions, like Joan said, and that's of our providers and of our attendees. What do they need? How can we help them? And where is the food coming from? You know, what information can we glean from our food service providers to make sure that we can be more intentional with what we're doing? And I think coming out of COVID, even, it may be a little bit harder because we're lacking in staff, but I think if you can be more intentional and make each dish a little bit better for everyone, that's phenomenal. So, and then here's my friend Gagan, who I've known for 35 years, and I actually taught him how to swim. But his response as a person who creates advertising and marketing for the Natural Products Expo for food companies and other companies that with purpose, who are designing food with purpose. Listen to what Gagan says that safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage means to him.
It means that people have the ability to manifest their values in what they're eating. And that means taking care of people and the planet in the way those products were created and sourced. It means they're regenerative, in that hopefully how they were grown, carbon was taken out of the air and put back into the soil where it belongs. It means they're organic. It means they're big plug for Non-GMO Project, who were a client of ours. It means that they're giving back to their local communities, that the packaging is thoughtful and hopefully compostable or renewable in some way. You know, I could keep going, but I think that
I totally get it.
that the people at that company are taken care of, and hopefully they're a 1% for the planet member. Kind of, for me, it's like there wouldn't even necessarily be a brand name. It's just all certifications and, values all over that brand. That's what's most important to me. And it really says a lot when someone invites me to a meeting or a convening, and how that meeting or convening, all the choices in that are intentional. And maybe there's those of us that are just a little busy to get so intentional about it. And I'll end with this. The Dalai Lama always said, if you don't have 10 minutes to meditate, you probably need 20. and so, for those of us that are so busy that we can't think about it, maybe really put a spot in your calendar to just sit and think about that, your choices as a business and as a consumer.
Okay, so the next person that I want you to hear from, or that I want to read what they said, is my friend Kiata Mincy Parker. She is a mixologist and bartender out of Atlanta with a farm specifically for bartenders. It's called A Sip of Paradise, and she was on the show in episode number 67. And her answer to my question of what does safe, sustainable, and inclusive mean to you, and I love this because it's coming from a bartender, is that it's knowing where your ingredients come from. It's supporting local growers of all kinds, making your own things instead of having to buy. And oh my gosh, I love that so much, because this is coming from a bartender, and she created this garden, A Sip of Paradise, to give bartenders during COVID a a place to relax and to breathe and to grow their own food, because getting into the garden and touching the food with your own fingers and tending to it as it grows just really makes you appreciate where it comes from. And I think that also goes in line with my friend Molly, who was on episode 149 with Aurora. And Molly is the director of corporate sustainability for Sodexo Live, which is a huge food service company. And so listen to what Molly has to say about knowing where your food comes from.
So to me, safe and sustainable has changed since the pandemic, right? So safe before just, meant that you made it in the building, right? And you were okay. Or you made it to your seat and you were okay. Safe now is different. So I think just for me, I think and I use the Hard Rock slogan when I put this to you, but like the love all, serve all concept and recognizing that everybody is there for a different reason and everybody has feelings about certain things and it takes nothing off of you to try to help them feel more comfortable. And so I look at it as, if something will make somebody more comfortable, then is it really hurting you in the process? And then, from a food perspective, I look at it as trying to keep those carbon miles down, right? Trying to keep the transportation miles down, trying to keep the food as close to the ground, to your table as you possibly can, and then helping those farmers along the way. So to me, that's what I consider a sustainable event.
And it wasn't, Molly's such a hoot. And right on kind of on that same message, I want you to hear from Brian Peterson. He is a fifth grade school teacher. And he went to the garden center and became a gardener and fell in love with bees. And he started a company called Bees in the D. And he was on episode 148. And I just love what he says about what, when we think of food and beverage, we typically just think about what's on our plate, right? But food and beverage starts way before then, the planting of the seed and all of that stuff. So listen to how Brian describes what safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage is, and how can you tie that to what Kiata said as well as what Molly said? And, let me know what you think.
I think the main thing for me is to remember that, when we think of food and beverage, we're thinking of that food and beverage that's right in front of us, but to remember that it starts way before that. And just like you wouldn't want chemicals on your dinner table or around your food, then why would you want those kind of chemicals around the beginning of your food? Does that kind of make sense?
Yep, it does.
And so think back to the roots of where that food is coming from and make sure that we're also having, sustainable and safe practices there, as well as where the food is being served.
Okay, so the next one that I want to read to you is from Dominique Teague. He is a chef in London, and he has got a 5-star restaurant, which is inside of a 5-star hotel. Years ago, he was so frustrated by work one day and finding all of these different food allergies and managing all these different dietary needs in his restaurant. He just got really frustrated by it. And he's like, what can we do? And he came to work one day and he said to his staff, he's like, can we just create our entire menu here in the restaurant dairy-free and gluten-free? And they said, yeah, let's do it. And so you have to listen to episode number 72 to hear how he did that. But I love how he gave a peace of mind to not only himself, but to his servers and his staff. So his statement to me was that when I asked him, what does safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage mean to you? He said, somewhere where the customer is completely relaxed and confident in the knowledge that the operation is taking what they do seriously. The team are actively engaged with their product, and it feels they are passionate talking about it and delivering the product. And I think that's really awesome. And I think in the podcast, I talk about how much by going gluten-free and dairy-free, he increased his sales in 1 quarter. Within 1 quarter, he increased his sales by like 45%, something like 35%. And his employee satisfaction jumped like over 75% because they did that. He gave them the confidence to understand the food that they were serving. And I think that just plays into so much of what we we don't think about when we're thinking about this. It's often thought about as a burden to try to create things for people with different dietary restrictions. But if you take the effort and you take the time to do it, you can actually, it pays off for you. In episode 52, leadership and workplace culture expert Nora Burns says that we shouldn't feel bad about what we want to eat or can eat, nor need to eat in order to sustain our health. And I think that's really important when we look at it, because there's so many situations where we get eye rolling and, people are like, oh my God, exasperated by having to do this. And I just think that's really, really important. And coming from a person who is in the HR and workplace culture arena, it's really important for us to understand that this doesn't have to do with just meetings that are at convention centers. This has to do with meetings that are actually in the office as well, and relate to our employees. So take a listen to what Nora says in her own words.
I could play with just that question for a solid 45 minutes, by the way, because there is some variation based on the situation. But for me, it means that there's no food, there's no shaming around it, right? Like, we shouldn't feel bad about what we want to eat or can eat or need to eat in order to sustain our health. And so there's no shame around it, that there are a variety of options and choices without us having to make special request, without having to be the person that comes over and says, oh, do you happen to have a version of that is gluten-free, that is without nuts, that is what have you. To make it easy, people should be able to sustain life fairly easy. So for me, it means that we can easily sustain our life and make sure that we are in a learning space, because usually when I'm dealing with food, it's in meetings and events or corporate settings where we need to be learning and productive, where we can do that without it being a hassle for us as the person who needs to nourish our bodies.
Donald Tracy, who is the founder of the Lipsmacking Foodie Tours, in episode 143, he actually really points out a good point when you're talking about safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage. And he says it's communication. You have to take the time to sit down and not make dietary needs or safety and sustainability and inclusion an afterthought. You can't just leave it up to chance. You really have to think about it. And I've taken his tours twice now, and I really have to say he does a stupendous job on thinking through all of the details. He came from working in high-end fine dining restaurants and created this tour company, and he doesn't want people who are taking his tours to feel that their needs are a nuisance. And I love that. He makes sure that they get fed first. It doesn't matter where they sit down at the table with the other attendees, but he really wants to make sure that you're putting thought into it. And if you don't take a moment to look at it from the operation or a guest perspective, you've got a bad experience for people. And so he and his team really take the time to listen to their attendees, he and his team take the time to really listen to their guests and customize their tours. And that's hard to find on a foodie tour. So listen to what Donald has to say here in his own words, and then go sign up for one of his tours when you're in Las Vegas at lipsmackandfoodietours.com.
Communication, taking the time to sit down and not making it an afterthought. If you just leave it up to, the moment, you're not taking the time to ensure that you're going to exceed expectations. And what I mean by this is things that could happen, like, you may not think of this because of the dynamic of the tour that we offer, the curated experience, but you might, if you don't communicate properly, you might end up getting accommodations where you're serving beet salads at each restaurant, and so you want to let the restaurant partner know, we're already featuring beets, or, we're already doing, whatever it might be. This way you don't duplicate dishes. One of the other things is the details. So, most of the time, people with restrictions, or, they are accustomed to waiting until everybody else is served and then they're dealt with, as if it's a nuisance. Well, what I like to do is I actually like to serve them first. And
I
what
got mine first. It's awesome.
and it makes you feel special. And as long as it's a beautiful spread that you're proud of, everybody around you will look at your dish and go, wow, maybe I should have said I was vegetarian. That looks amazing. So rather than, and people won't start eating until everybody's served, and you don't want to feel guilty for having a restriction and others are letting their food get cold because you're having to wait for your plate. So we serve you first. This way, it's all taken care of, and nobody is trying to serve people the wrong items because it's already taken care of and it's out of the element. So just putting thought into it.
So listening to all my guests answer the question of what does safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage mean to them really inspires me. And it shows that there are different perspectives to think of. And I said that in the intro as well. There's so many different aspects to think about. How do you create the safe, sustainable, and inclusive experience? And those three things are separate, but they're also the same, and they create that experience. And food and beverage is just, like I said at the very beginning, is more than just checking off an item off the menu and selecting this. It's really putting thought into what you're ordering and creating a greater experience for your guests. So I hope that you've learned something from listening to these clips from the podcast episodes. I cannot believe again that this is the 150th episode. Let me know how many of you have listened to. Who are your favorites, interviews that I've done? And again, let me know who you want to hear from. Is there a cookbook author? Is there a chef that you want to hear from? A hotel, something like that. Let me know who you're listening to, who you want to hear from, and I will go after them and try to get them on the show. So I appreciate you supporting the podcast. Let your friends and family know, to tune in and forward this on to your food and beverage partners that you want to work with and have a better understanding of what food and beverage should be and can be. So until next time, stay safe and eat well. Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.